The idea is to invest so that someday the money works for you and you don't have to work for money. Anybody else who tries to answer those questions and is not a geotechnical forensic engineer is pulling your leg. You get that engineer seal at the end that says it's been done properly. That's more valuable than a lifetime warranty. Those things are not worth the paper they're written on.
Welcome back, investor. We've got another episode of the Passive Income Adventures to share with you the journeys of people who are investing, working hard so that they can build passive income so that they can retire when and where they want. You don't always have a choice. You say, I never want to retire. I love my job. But to be able to retire if you need to, if you're told they don't need you anymore, or you have a health problem or need to take care of some loved ones, we really want to equip people to be able to have more control over their financial future, their financial security, and their financial freedom. So today we've got Bob Brown speaking to us. He is a foundation repair expert. And if you are investing in any kind of real estate, whether you're an active investor owning and managing the properties yourselves, like I do, or you're a passive investor where you're only putting in capital, which I like to do as well because we are early retired ourselves. My husband was an IT guy. I was a stay-at-home homeschool mom, a photographer until we found real estate and we were rapidly able to build our wealth and retire early. And so this podcast is all about sharing stories with you, the listener, to be able to make better investing decisions and better entrepreneurial or business management decisions so that you can make more money, so you have more money to invest, so that you have more time. So thank you for joining us on the show today. Let's welcome Bob in so that we can learn about why foundations are such an important part of real estate and why so many people are scared of them. So how about you kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this line of work and how this business has benefited you not only with a stream of income, but with a really important skill set that has made you a better investor.
Great. Thanks, Emma. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate that. So I started out, graduated from ASU, Arizona State University in 1984 in finance and got two bachelor degrees, one in finance and one in architecture. And at the time, I didn't really have any money. So I worked my way through college doing concrete repairs for commercial properties, fixing their planter curves out in front. And when I graduated, I thought, you know what? The business is going good. I'm just going to keep doing that. But I always had a soft spot in my heart for investing in real estate because I knew so much about it from my education. And it's interesting. I had a house that I was operating my small business from, and across the alley and back, I was running out of room and needed more space. And I saw this house with a telephone company trucks going in and out. So I called the telephone company. I said, hey, can I lease part of your space? And they said, no, because we're going to sell it. And I'm like, oh, how much do you want for it? They said, $13,000. I'm like, sold. Now, this was in like 1986 or 7, somewhere around there, maybe. And it was totally blank. There was nothing in it. It was never a house. It's just 4 walls and a slab, no plumbing, no electrical. So I had to cut the floors and put plumbing in and build walls and build the whole thing out. But still, for $13,000, it was a good investment. And you know what? From there, I just kept doing it. I kept buying houses and I've done it for years. Now, I'm retired, sold my business, had almost 100 employees, sold it last year, put all that money in a big stock portfolio. But honestly, my real estate portfolio is just as valuable, if not more, than the money I got from selling my company. So it's been a good strategy for me. And I've learned how foundations interact with buying and selling property. And it's a big part.
Yeah, I'm interested. I've seen many times where they'll talk about like Shaq, right? Shaq made this many millions of dollars playing basketball, but then he made hundreds of millions of dollars owning businesses. And so I've noticed the same thing. It's we've made money off of our real estate business, like actively purchasing and managing properties, but we've made much more money off of just the passive part of it, like the appreciation, other things like
Right.
that. So I feel like the skills that we've learned as entrepreneurs and as real estate entrepreneurs have paid us more on the investing side than we could ever earn on the agri side. Sounds like you're saying something pretty similar.
Yep, that's absolutely right. I've told my kids the idea is to invest so that someday the money works for you and you don't have to work for money.
We've had the same thing because being retired and you get to the point where you're almost empty nester, I am having a harder time keeping myself motivated to go out and crush it. And people talk about that a lot, especially in the entrepreneurial community where, oh, we're going to crush it. We're going to scale. We're going to do all these amazing things. But at a certain point, it's just so nice to not have to think that way. And it changes the way that you live your life and then run your business. For example, you sold your company a year-ish ago. and you're still out there working and contributing to the body of knowledge and to people's experiences as a quote unquote required person. People make fun of me too. They're like, you're not retired, you're running a business. I'm like, I don't have to run the business. That's the
Right.
point. Or are you in the same boat?
I authored a book. I invented and patented devices. I've got software that engineers and contractors use. My focus in life is that I want to make the foundation repair world better. It's got lots of problems and I can see those problems, but I want to make it better. And I don't have to do it. I don't need it. I got plenty of money. I just want to do it because I want to make the world a better place.
I agree. And you just get to the point where you can only go to Hawaii so we
Ri-
right?
Yeah.
And I love spending time with my loved ones, family members, and that's really important. But my kids, they're not retired. They have jobs and they have things and they have significant others and friends in their own lives. So I'm going to spend all my time with my kind of empty nester kids is also in a way somewhat ridiculous. No grandkids yet. Maybe when I get some grandkids, I can
Yeah.
s- more. But for right now, you need to think of a way to still useful, needed, and contribute. And that's the beauty of the entrepreneurial journey leading to the passive income. If you do it right, eventually you have so many more options.
That's right.
Okay, so own enough properties, eventually you're going to have foundation issues. I think most residential homeowners who just have their one house or they bought a few houses in their lifetime, they hear foundation problems and they just immediately feel like a jump scare in a
And
haunted house, right? It's
now,
just a horrible thing. And your neighbors are going through it and suddenly you're terrified because the builder that built their house built your house. It's just this horrible thing. So when I first started real estate investing, the second house I ever bought it was built in 1906. It was on a rubble foundation. And you could see on the underpinning of the concrete on one side of the house that had been some movement, some shifting. I just remember standing there, like, I don't know anything about foundations. I don't know if I should buy any walls and this thing gonna fall down on me. I just remember that thought's been here since 1906. But I did not do it correctly. But that was the first like step off of this isn't that terrifying. I'm getting such a good deal on this house that even if I budget for some foundation repair, it's still a good deal. So tell me about that. Why are people so afraid? Why is it such an untouchable in the real estate industry? And you having that knowledge and now me, the knowledge that I've gotten over various projects and various foundations, it doesn't really scare me that much more either. So get me to that point where you start out terrified or you end up like, wow, this is actually an asset this is something I can deal with that most people are afraid of.
so first of all, the reason why there's so much fear based around it is because the foundation repair companies basically make their money based on that fear. And they basically, in order to make money for themselves, plant the idea that their house is going to have serious problems, it's going to fall down, blah, blah, blah. They don't really come right out and say that because that would be like unethical, but they pretty much dance around the whole thing. And by the time you're done, that's what you believe. And the problem is that these guys are not really experts in this area. They're paid commission salespeople, and these guys make pretty good money. These sales guys make between 100 and 300,000 a year, 100% commission. And if they don't sell 100 grand a year, they get kicked to the curb. So there's a lot of pressure to perform. But my point is, when you have all these questions, you see this crack and you see these problems, you want to know, how serious is it? Is this a real problem? Is it going to continue? Is it going to stop? What happens if I do nothing? You have all these questions and you call a foundation repair company. The answer to those questions are all going to be, it's only going to get worse, blah, blah, blah. In other words, buy now, right? It may be all you need to do is fix the drainage. There may be very simple things. May need to do nothing. It's all done moving and it may never move again, right? Nobody can tell you the answers to those questions unless they're a forensic geotechnical engineer. Anybody else who tries to answer those questions and is not a geotechnical forensic engineer is pulling your leg. They don't know. They're just BSing you. And the key is to don't call a foundation repair company. Now, they're easy to find. If you Google foundation repairs, they're going to come up. They're really good at marketing. But what you've got to do is find forensic geotechnical engineers, and they will give you the straight shot. They don't have an axe to grind, and they're not going to try to sell you anything because they don't do foundation repairs. And so they're going to tell you, oh, yeah, just fix the drainage. Or they might say, hey, let's monitor it for a year and see how much it moves. It's not going to fall down in that year. It's not going to fall down ever, probably. I've seen very few houses in 30 years of doing this that ever had like, or somebody was scared to go inside. Just maybe two out of thousands and thousands. So You just want to get the real stuff. In order to get that, you got to call the right person. You got to call a forensic geotechnical engineer. Now, a geotechnical engineer is somebody who specializes in soils. Now, let me tell you, everybody has a misconception about soil. They think it's just brown dirt below this. It's all this homogeneous soil that's all just down there. No, it's very complicated. It's deposited in layers. Each layer has different mineral contents, different densities, different affinities for water, and the layers are not even. Some disappear and some get fat and skinny, and there's rocks intermixed with it. And water moves between these layers and does different things. And the fact of the matter is that when it moves through these various layers, it does different things to each of those layers. So it could be several things all happening at the same time. And a geotechnical engineer understands all of these layers, understands what they're doing and why they're doing it. They understand the local history to the geology and how it got deposited and what those layers are. They do borings down in the ground regularly, so they get refreshed as to what it is. And maybe they might want to, if there's real questions, they might want to do a boring on your house. I doubt it. If there's something really bad and you want to know the answer, they could do that. But those are the experts. And don't make the mistake of calling a structural engineer is not going to be able to help you. They're going to show up to the house and they're going to go, yeah, you have cracks, but it's not structurally deficient. You're okay. And so you think, oh, phew. And then you say, well, wait, Mr. Engineer, could it get really bad? Oh, yeah. If it keeps moving, it could get real bad. Was it going to keep moving? I don't know. You're going to have to call a geotech engineer for that. Thanks for nothing. So don't make the mistake of calling a structural engineer. Some of them I've seen a few of them that are pretty good, but really forensic. But what I mean by forensic is guys that go into looking at existing properties. Most engineers work on large infrastructure in the new design phase where they build bridges and dams and commercial buildings and freeways. Very few work in residential. And of those, very few do forensics. So they're hard to find, but they're worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, I know. I didn't realize until we started our first large development of a high rise and having our geotech engineer consulting on our foundation design. And I don't think I really understood that
Right.
before that point. And here's the funny thing about that. And again, it goes back to the fear thing. When we first bought that piece of property, my partners were commercial contractors. And so they were talking about budgeting for the pilings. And
They want
somebody
to cut out the geotech.
basically, other people who were looking at the property, when they found out that I had it under contract, just a small world, right? They say,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're going to have the pilings that go down in 30 feet or whatever it was on that building." And I said, "Yeah, we're aware of that, and we've budgeted for it, and the project still makes sense." And so when you get to the point where you realize like anything is fixable, as long as the numbers
Right.
work. And I felt like as long as we were aware that it was a possibility and had a contingency budget for that, it just removed a lot of the fear from saying,
Right.
"Oh, well, we're gonna buy all of this land and build a 7-story building on it." And I had never done anything like that before. But like I said, my partner was a concrete contractor and an excavator. And so he
Right.
worked with geotech guy. And it was just an eye opener for me on how this kind of stuff gets designed and maintained. There was no structural engineer on that portion of the project at all.
Right. When it comes to foundations, the geotechs are the experts.
Okay, that's good to know because I know with my residential stuff, it did not occur to me to have geotech come out and look at my residential stuff because I
Right.
live in a larger town where we have our choice of geotech engineers. And so having them come out there and just paying them by, oh, you just pay them by the hour instead of booking them to do a job, you just pay them by the console.
That's
Okay.
what I would do. And they're not going to be free. And that's the thing. Foundation repair companies, they're going to come out for free. And
Really.
guess what? You're going to get what you pay for. You're not going to get analysis. You're going to get a sales pitch dressed up like analysis. And with a geotechnical engineer, you're going to get the real thing. You're going to get the real analysis, but you're going to have to pay for it. It's well worth the money. It's well worth the money for sure.
Now, I don't really think I understood the risk that I was taking because what I would do when I had, let's go back to this Rebel Foundation of this 100-year-old building, is I had multiple companies come out to give me a bid and foundation repair companies.
Right.
And one wanted to prop it up with piers and it gave me for like $12,000 or something like that. And I said, let's just keep an eye on it, measure it, come back next year, see if it moves. I don't know
Right.
where
Smart. Good job.
it wasn't like somebody told. I prefer other people to tell me the things so I can be like, okay, now I know what to be aware because they explain it. So I think I just got lucky there that I said, just measure it. We'll keep an eye on it. Been here 100 years. And then the next company that came out, similar type of thing. And the third company that came out, he said, you can't peer this up. It's a bunch of pile of wrecks. There's
Yeah.
nothing to do. It
And
hasn't gone anywhere. It's not really gonna go anywhere. So anybody who told you they can pair this up is lying to you. And I just remember
right.
thinking, oh, this can be a scammy business.
It is. And I'll tell you, that's one of the problems that happens in this industry. Susie Smith calls up 3 foundation repair contractors. They give her 3 different bids for 3 different things. How is she supposed to know which one's right? She's not the expert, right? And that's the problem. And so if you get a good geotechnical engineer, he'll say, first of all, he'll use engineering principles to determine how bad it is, severity. And it's not some BS severity like you get from foundation repair guys where they say something like, oh, yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, Mr. Brown, I think it's about an 8.5. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, what is that? The Richter scale of foundation repair? I've never heard of that, 1 to 10. And then I'm thinking, wait a minute, how did you arrive at 8.5? Oh, based on my years of experience and the fact that my kids need braces. And that's what happens in the foundation world. So what you want is an engineer to, here's how bad it is. It meets or does not meet industry standards. It's going to get worse or it's not going to get worse. And you might just be able to fix it by fixing the drainage on your property. Make sure the water moves away or stays or whatever. There's different strategies for different geographic areas. But if you have to have repairs, like you need underpinning or whatever, or some serious, he's going to give you a plan that says, do this, you know. Now you can take that plan and go get 3 bids for that plan and get apples to apples. Really, you're getting good value for your money, as opposed to 3 different plans that you have no idea which one's right.
Yeah. And taking a plan from a salesperson, I don't realize that either. Especially with a larger company, it's the person who comes out to do the bid is a salesperson. It's not necessarily the technician that's going to be doing the repairs.
I,
That's a good point. I feel like I know a lot about formations for your average person, but when we were first talking the first time, I was like, okay, I got a lot to still learn. Well, I'll give you some context here on directed at the passive investor, because this is the passive income adventures. We talk a lot about entrepreneurship, like I said, but the goal for most of the guests and certainly most of the listeners of the show is to eventually get to the point where we don't have to worry about this kind of stuff anymore. We have our money invested with somebody who hopefully knows this stuff. I can handle it on our behalf. So I'll give you an example. We have an apartment building where we had unforeseen foundation issues, and it wasn't structural, nothing's going to fall down. There was just a lot of water incursion, and we're watching it ruin the flooring. And then suddenly there are little critters in there and things like that. We're like, okay, there's some kind of a crack or something here. And we had to hire someone to come and dig it out. And I remember talking to my partners and saying, what are we going to write on the email this month to our investors that suddenly we have this foundation repair that was not budgeted for? We've owned the property like, I don't know, 5 or maybe 6 years by now. And so stuff comes up in 5 or 6 years that you're not going to
true.
see on an inspection. But at the same time, like, they're going to be terrified. They're going to be like, what? We got foundation problems because some of them have never been active real estate investors and they still
Right.
haven't worked. Well, for the passive investor, how much do they really need to know about this stuff? And what kinds of questions should they be asking before they put their money in a deal? So that they can see that the operator has a clue on how to look for it, how to budget for it, and if it does happen after the fact, like how to handle it.
First of all, if you're an active investor, you want to have a good relationship with a good forensic engineer. And as a
Right.
passive investor, that's one of the things you should be looking for in an active investor. Does he have those relationships that will help him succeed? Now, if you're owning a property and you want to sell it someday, guess what? They're going to do some due diligence on it, right? They're going to call, if it's a home, they're going to call a home inspector. If it's commercial, it's going to be a little more involved, right? You want to be prepared for that. Now, how do you be prepared? First of all, as an active investor, you should understand the basics of what to look for in a foundation problem. Okay. So we could talk about that for a minute. You want to be able to know what are the signs? What should I look for? And in the real estate industry, there's what they call the tool and tuxedo rule. So real estate agents are not responsible for a problem if they can't locate it while they're wearing a tuxedo, or they're not responsible for the problem if they need a tool to discover the problem, like a screwdriver or a hammer or a pair of pliers. Guess what? You can see cracks in walls in a tuxedo and you don't need a screwdriver to see it. So, really, agents and active investors should be prepared to know what these look like. So, the first sign is cracks in interior walls. That's probably the most obvious thing. If you have brick or block construction, you'll see it on the outside pretty easily as well. Stucco, not so much. Siding, even less. But interior cracks is a good starting point. If you have doors that are pinched, so on one side you have a big gap, on the other side it's pinched tight. Okay, that's a pinched door. That means one side's going up and the other side's going down. Or windows can do the same thing. And windows are even better. That's my secret little tool because people sand off doors and fix them, but they generally don't go and fix windows. So you can discover this kind of stuff with windows. Now, if you have slopes in your floors or cracks in your floors. Now, having said all that, what you want to keep in mind is patterns, groupings. People come to me all the time and say, "Oh, I have a crack in my floor." And I'm like, everybody has a crack in their floor. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. If that's the only thing you have, it's no sweat. Fix the crack. But if you have a grouping, a pattern of these things where they all start exhibiting together as a part of a pattern, that's when you got to pay attention and go, I think we need to get bigger guns. We need to find somebody that can help us. And that person, of course, is a forensic geotechnical engineer. And if you own that property, you'll want to do that before you put it up for sale. Because the last thing you want to do is have a buyer come along, see some of these signs of stress, hire a foundation repair company who then comes in the middle of escrow and says, "Oh, yeah, it's 80 grand to fix this. Thank you." That's not good for anybody, right? It's not good for the buyer. They're headed for the hills. The listing agent usually gets fired because the owner cannot ask them to lie about it. So they get fired. Then the owner goes and patches it all up nice and neatly and finds a new listing agent. So nobody wins in that scenario. You don't want to be caught up in that. The best thing is to, if you notice any of these signs, a qualified licensed engineer to give you an opinion. And that opinion might be, hey, it's a nothing burger. Don't sweat it. It's done moving. It's not a big deal. And now the inspector brings it up. You give him this sealed letter by an engineer that says, no way, it's not a problem. I got an expert who knows a lot more than the inspector. And you sail on through. The engineer may say, hey, you're probably going to need a little bit of work. Okay, I'll give you a plan. You get it out bid, get it done. I'll supervise the project, make sure it gets done right. I'll be a special inspector, which is another thing that should always happen, from the engineer who designed it, not the contractor's special inspector. And then when you're all done, the engineer seals it and says, yep, this was done per my intent. Now you can say to the buyer, hey, look, we had a problem. We had an engineer who designed this thing properly, oversaw it, and sealed it. Now I have the get out of jail free card. And it's probably worth more money because, hey, look, the property next door didn't say nothing. What are they saying? Where they covered something up? You don't know. You don't say anything. You don't know what you got. This way, you're coming clean. You've done it. You've got everything all taken care of. And you have the engineer's seal at the end. That's the most important thing. To get that engineer's seal at the end that says it's been done properly. That's more valuable than a lifetime warranty. Those things are not worth the paper they're written on. Every foundation repair company gives a lifetime warranty. There's so many loopholes and so many get out of jail free things for them. Those things are worthless.
Okay. Yeah. Again, another thing that you hear and you think, oh, lifetime warranty. We'd have lifetime warranties on things like our transmission or the roof of our RV, and they do a pretty good job of honoring it. But I have always wondered, like, about the extended warranty plan or the lifetime warranty plan if it's by a company that it's something as complicated as what we're talking about with foundations. So,
I'll tell you one thing about that you should know. So a lot of, we talk about soils and different kinds of soils, right? And some of it's clay. Clay can expand and contract with water. And so you can have settlement for a lot of reasons. It could be clay shrinking. It could be consolidation of sands, or you could have heaving, right? Heaving is a totally different problem. You cannot fix it with helical piers, and it's a serious problem. Heaving is a very powerful force. It will break concrete and bend steel. You cannot stop it. So a lot of times you get that. So you get a lifetime warranty. And 5 years later, you get cracks. You got more cracks in my house. You call them up and you go, hey, get out here. You got a lifetime warranty. You need to fix this stuff. Then they send out one of their really experienced guys, and he says, "Oh, yeah, well, this is from heave, and it says right here in our contract, pairs can't fix heave, and we can't do anything about it. We exclude it. There's nothing we can do. See you later." And
Mm.
then if the homeowner is really smart, he might say, "Wait, if it's heave, didn't you guys diagnose it wrong in the first place?" And then he says, "Hey, what do we know? We're just stupid contractors. We're not engineers." Now they say that, right? But
Yeah.
they're selling it to you the first time. They're like, "Oh, we're smarter than engineers. We know everything." And then that's at the end, that's their get out of jail. And they do it all the time.
Are you seeing in the industry that this trend has always been like this? Is it beginning worse? How concerning is it for the average either landlord with a few single family homes or somebody who's passively invested in maybe some commercial properties? Like, how bad is this?
I think it's going to get worse, and I'll tell you why. There's consolidation happening in the foundation repair industry. Private equity is coming through and buying up mom and pops and consolidate them into very large companies. These very large companies have a lot of resources. And if you're going to fight them in court, guess what? Be prepared to spend about $500,000 in 5 years and probably still lose because they have everything nailed down. And before all the consolidation, and there's still mom and pops out there, but they're getting bought up. And before you could maybe on somewhat more equal terms with the owner and get them to fess up and do the right thing. But with these private equity companies and these larger companies that are coming through that own multiple property or multiple companies all over the nation, they're going to be much harder to deal with. They're going to be hard nosed. It's all about budgets. It's all about money. They got to show the investors, the private equity investors, that they're making money. That's the future of this business.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like I'm seeing a lot of roll up funds right now. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've been getting a lot of messages recently from people I knew who were raising money for, say, multifamily real estate. And suddenly they're like, hey, we're going to do a litigation fund so that they can go out and help lawyers front the money they need to litigate these cases. Or they're running a car wash fund, or they're running some kind of blue collar business. We're going to do asphalt and paving or foundation. I've seen foundation repair a fund, a roll up fund for
Oh, yeah,
workplace.
they're out there.
Yeah, so it's almost, hey, this real estate thing is rough right now, commercial real estate, interest rates. So I got to go find my next gig. I got to go. And suddenly I'm an expert in roll up funds for blue collar businesses or foundation repair. And I'm thinking, like, I know a lot about foundations in general as an owner. But
Yeah.
have a technical conversation with me about this. And I'd be like, yeah, I'm at level 2.
Right. It's very difficult. There's a lot of knowledge. And when a foundation repair person comes, a sales guy comes to your house and talks all about everything, you're thinking, well, that guy really knows a lot. Let me tell you, those guys don't know jack. And that just tells you how much there is to know because it's a complicated business.
There's a lot going on. I think every building I have seems like it has its own foundation story. It's every time we've ever bought a house. I remember we had one that we purchased in Texas. It was the first time we had bought a home that was not new construction. And I remember in one of our neighborhoods, somebody had a sign out in front of their house, how their house was basically built over in Austin, right over the cave structure and the aquifers, and how things were coming apart in their foundation and the builder wouldn't do anything. So they basically put this manifesto on the front of their house about how the insurance wouldn't cover it, builder wouldn't cover it, nobody could cover it. They have a mortgage on a house that is unlivable and unsellable. And I remember standing there thinking, we use the same builder and we haven't had any problems at all. Were we did we not know what to look for? So when we moved out of that house and bought the first, like I said, not new construction ever, we had seen this in new construction. There's a lot of settling. There's a lot of looking at a crack appear in your drywall. Is this just normal new construction settling? Is this
Right.
problem? It was gonna be like the person with the manifesto down the street. So when we bought our house, we closed on it. We had an inspection like normal, right? But no geotech guys. And when we started pulling the flooring out, because it was a fixer upper, I'm seeing cracks in the concrete floor and I
Yeah.
freaked out. And I
Yeah.
called the realtor who had a lot of construction experience and he said, all concrete has cracks in it.
Right.
It's right. The foundation is fine. If it's more than quarter inch off this, that, all the, like you said, patterns,
Right.
but just you're getting just feeling I don't have what it takes to make these kinds of purchase decisions. And it's
Right.
very scary. And even wondering, is he just trying to make us feel better about the house that we just bought with him?
Yeah.
And
Right.
just not understanding. So all of this to say that it's just one of those things like every property has its own foundation story and you're going to be learning for everyone. And they're all terrifying because so many variables go into this.
It's terrifying but most of the time it's not. I would say 90% of the time or more, it's not. There's all this fear, but it comes from basically the urban myths that could come with the foundation repair industry. That's basically where it comes from. It's a $55 billion industry annually. And if I had to guess, I'd guess that about half of it is being wasted on stuff that doesn't need to be done.
So I'm going to offend every dentist listening to this. Look at all the root canals with the American Dental
Yeah.
Association, where 80% of root canals are not necessary. Is it like the car repair where you go into the dealership and they tell you need
Yeah.
$7,000 work and it's just you need a new fuse? Is that kind of what's going on? Because they're
It's the same thing. Yeah. Air conditioning guy comes out and tells you, oh, you got to replace this air conditioner because, hey, you get a lot more money for replacements than they do for repairs, right?
uh, yeah, I guess that's a really good point because we face this when you're at the top of the stack as an owner yourself. You know a lot about foundations, but you could have an HVAC guy come out and try and pull one over you. You can have this plumbing, the stuff that's hidden inside your walls that gives a lot of fear to property owners. I don't know. Has this helped you to be a better consumer of other trades, things outside of your professional scope?
It does because I can see, having been on the inside, really what happens and how the decision process works and what their motivations are. And I can imagine it being not a whole lot different in other industries. The difference in the foundation business is that you're talking about the structural system of a house, right? To repair it, you should be an engineer, but for some reason, the foundation repair industry has gotten around that, and they make all these repairs to structural components of a house, and they're basically practicing engineering without a license. At least with air conditioning or with cars, you don't really need to be an engineer, or you don't need to be a mechanical engineer or whatever to do a car. That's the difference.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like just buyer beware. And sometimes I can understand why people get scared of being their property owner, but even some passive investors are scared because they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And they are questions to ask, and they don't know how to vet if their operator actually knows the right questions to ask with all of the physical concerns of caring for a building. And this is even outside of like marketing and lease up and good accounting and all of that. Just the fact that this is a physical building that needs love and attention and care and money. We call one of our properties the thirsty property because something's always broken. It just never cash flows because we're just always fixing something. And so these types of things, I don't think a lot of people realize that there's so much physical attention. But then that's an extra layer of fear for others who do realize that there's a lot going on, but they, again, know that they don't know what they don't know. So how do you get over that reticence of making decisions based on we're just doing the best we can here and having it work out? Because I don't know, you can't win them all.
That's true. If I was an active investor, I would have a good relationship with a good local forensic geotechnical engineer. And if I was a passive investor, I would want to see the active guys have that relationship. That would be the litmus test for me.
Okay. Yeah. And would the same go for things like roofing or, like you said, HVAC or other types of major systems?
For a house, probably not. You can get by with having a home inspector who's good. Look at all those things in general. For commercial property, you may want to consider having experts in some of these areas that are more problematic, right? Because a home inspector is just not going to cut it for a commercial property that has very complicated systems, right?
So let's fast forward to the point where we're getting ready to sell a property. I just sold that little rubble foundation house, first time home buyers, and it qualified for an HA loan. And basically, the inspector said the same thing. He's not going anywhere. And so I felt, well, okay, we're going to see that piece of the underpinning that's popped out, and they're going to panic and they're going to freak out. And this whole thing is going to get ruined, just like what you said. But it ended up working out where we have a couple of commercial buildings that were getting ready to sell. Some of them have had some foundation repairs before. And I'm finding myself having the same stellar's anxiety that something's going to come up, just like what you described. So, what can I do on my part as a seller to make sure that we have adequately disclosed and protected our buyer so that they feel comfortable with making the purchase?
Yeah. So I will suggest that one of the things that you can do to give confidence is to have what we call a floor elevation survey. Are you familiar with that?
No, I don't think I.
Okay. A floor elevation survey is when you have a manometer or a similar instrument and it's connected to a hose, and you go and read all over the house, room to room, and it gives you the elevations, and you
Okay.
record those elevations, and then you could put those numbers into a piece of software
Mhm.
that gives you a visual representation of where it's high and where it's low by how much and all that kind of stuff. And then you can overlay that with any damage, and that becomes very valuable. It becomes even more valuable if you have one from 5 years ago that you
Okay.
can compare. Now you can say over the intervening time, it's moved this way, right? Or it hasn't moved at all. It's like a rock. And now you have data that you could use. And what I'm trying to do, one of my goals in the industry is to train home inspectors to be able to offer these floor elevation surveys on every transaction. Now, if you're already an owner and the water's under the bridge on that, go hire a forensic geotech and have them do it and get that floor elevation survey and have it in your back pocket. Because now, 5 years from now, when you sell the house, you go do another one. It's a lot cheaper because all the data is already in there. You just have to go and check a few things and you can see, okay, let's move this tiny little bit, which is really nothing. So you're good to go. And that gives you a whole lot of confidence that you didn't have before. And guess what? Let's suppose you have a catastrophic problem. Okay. You have a pipe break underneath the house and everything just goes to hell in a handbasket and your foundation starts moving like crazy, right? Typically, insurance companies don't cover what we call earth movement exclusions. They have an earth movement exclusion that if your building moves as a result of earth movement, sorry, we have an exclusion, we don't cover that. But if you have a catastrophic problem like a pipe break and you can prove that it's not from the soil, it's from the pipe break, then you can get it covered. And I actually had that happen on one of my houses and I got the insurance to cover it. And the way you do it is you have this floor level survey already in your back pocket. And now you have this huge problem, right? And everything goes wonkers on you. Now you can come to the insurance company and say, oh, here it was before, and here it is like right after. Fess up. I need you to pay. This is a catastrophic problem, and it's not caused from earth movement. So there's a number of good reasons to have those floor elevation surveys because they help in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. This is reminding me the property in Texas that we were going to buy, a multiple building apartment complex. And we knew this happened when we were buying it. It was one of those things like, did we budget enough for this? Is this going to happen on other buildings? We're basically on a slab foundation in Texas, and you have old cast iron pipes running underneath that foundation or in the foundation. And the cast iron eventually
Yeah,
rusts
rusts.
out. So as the pipe was collapsing, the foundation was going with it. And we ended up not buying that property. We know the person who did buy it. It ended up being a disaster. And it was a disaster because of insurance company stuff like what you're talking about,
Right,
not being able to prove that some of these foundation failures were
right.
the cause of the pipe failing. So how much of that on older buildings, especially slabs, because those seem to be the
Right.
most problematic in my foundation history. But I don't know. Tell me about when you're looking at that and you're looking at that either as a buyer or as a seller on how to make good decisions surrounding that pretty common problem with cast iron.
Yeah. So cast iron is going to be a problem sooner or later, right? That water is going to sit in the bottom of the pipe and it's going to rust it out. You're going to have a problem. Now, if you're in an area with relatively stable soils, might not be a big deal. I can tell you in Dallas, there's probably 800 foundation repair companies. In Phoenix, Arizona, there's 5. What does that tell you? That tells you that the soils in Phoenix are much more stable than they are in Dallas, right? So if you have a cast iron problem in Phoenix, that's probably not going to be the end of the world. In Dallas, that could be a huge problem because you have very volatile soils there. And so part of it is just your geology, know your area, know the problem. And I'll tell you, the reason I say that is because, for instance, Houston, okay, in Houston, it's a very wet climate, been wet for tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years, right? Louisiana, same thing. The name of the game is to keep the water the same. You want to avoid changes in water. And in Houston, the strategy is to put a soaker around your house with a timer that turns on every day and waters around your foundation. Now, I can tell you in Phoenix, you would need to get your head examined if you ever did anything like that, because the name of the game in Phoenix, very dry environment, is to get the water away, have gutters and pipe that gutter 20 feet away and get it away. That's the name of the game. So you want to know what your local geology is. And obviously the best guys to teach you that are forensic geotech engineers, but you might not want to like just maybe go take them to lunch and get a relationship with them and understand what's going on, but you don't want to pay a couple $1,000s just to learn that. They'll probably go to lunch with you. They're good guys. I go to lunch with them all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. We took ours out to lunch when we're out there at the site. We're like, let's go grab some lunch. You learn a lot. So that's actually a really good tip right there. Is want to learn something. Sometimes you just got to pony up for the lunch. I also like how you talked about knowing where you live and knowing about the soil. We've mentioned this already a couple times just in the show, the limestone,
Right.
the Swiss cheese look, and we're awesome stuff. Or now that we live in Salt Lake City, we went up to tour our Capitol building. And down at the bottom of the Capitol building, you have a viewing windows that run all the way around where the thing is now loaded on springs for the earthquakes that we get here. Just enough. The insurance doesn't cover any of it because it's earth movements. And
Right.
just watching and learning about this kind of stuff just because we live here and understanding that when we're building a building here versus when we were building in Texas, that we're going to have some very different concerns. We have a neighborhood right now where the kids are fascinated watching a house slide down the hill. It's like
Yeah.
the
Right.
townhome unit, and this one is just fallen off the end, and they'd been watching for 2.5 years, extensive, massive repairs going on here. Unfortunately, that was under warranty. Just up the hill, you can actually see it out our window. To one house just fell into a sinkhole off the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Right, I think it made national news
Yeah.
because somebody didn't engineer the foundation correctly. So these,
Well, or maybe they built it without talking to a geotechnical engineer because if they had a good geotechnical advice, they had realized, hey, this is karst. There's this limestone. There's probably going to be some cavities underneath. You got a high risk for that, right? Another area that's interesting is a suburb of San Diego called Oceanside, and we nicknamed it Ocean Slide because all the houses slide right down the hill.
one of our investors lives down the street from that house, and we traveled full time, and we were not in the area at the time, but I saw it on the news, and I called him. I'm like, "Hey, that's not your house, is it?" He's no, it's for free. Just, I think this is the kind of stuff that makes people so afraid of touching this
Yeah,
stuff.
if you have a house go down the hill, you got big problems, right?
There's a little PTSD there that we'll need to recover from. But if you're looking at a purchase, maybe you might feel comfortable purchasing something that has had a history of foundation repairs. At what point does something just become that untouchable cast where if you hear it's had foundation repairs, does it just burn the value forever? Or at a certain point, you're like, if the repair was done correctly, it shouldn't affect the value of the property. Tell me a little bit about that.
As I mentioned, lifetime warranties from foundation repair companies don't mean anything to me. They're not worth the paper they're written on. But the key is if you had the original design for the repair done by an engineer and he special inspected it, not the contractor's special inspection, but the designer goes out and special inspects it. And by the way, let me just tell you one more thing what happens. 30% of the time, the contractor in the middle of the project comes to the homeowner and says, we're going to have to add 5 more piers. We got things we didn't really, there's unknown hidden conditions, blah, blah, blah. And you're thinking, how am I supposed to know whether he's really being straight with me or not? How do I know? I'm not an expert. But if the engineer who designed it gives the plan and the contractor comes back and says, hey, we need to add 5 more piers, the engineer who knows this business inside and out is going to say, whoa, nay, hog breath, explain this to me. Tell me why you didn't bid this in the first place. All that kind of stuff, right? And at the end of the job, the contractor's got to satisfy, the engineer has to be happy with it. If he thinks that they cut corners or if they didn't do it right, then he's not going to seal it at the end, and then the contractor's not going to get paid.
Okay.
But in the end, if you get that seal from the engineer, if you're buying a house and you see that seal that says it was done the way I said it should be done, that's your ticket right there. Now, unfortunately, there's not very many of those, but that's the way it's going to happen more and more in the future.
If you have anything to do with it, which it sounds like
Yeah.
this is your post-retirement mission, is to bring some transparency and some accountability into the industry. Now, I do have my fair share also of bad engineer stories, right? Like civil engineers who say they can handle permitting and they're not filling out paper properly. So I wonder, how do you vet the engineer if he knows what he's doing? Because we've heard this before over those karst caves, just being able to say they
Yeah.
didn't engineer it properly, the engineer didn't design it properly, and now the builder
Yeah.
just built it to their specs and it didn't work. So how do you
Exactly.
know if your engineers?
So first of all, as we talked about, most engineers are in commercial work, and of those that are in residential, very few do forensics. So what you want to get a good geotechnical engineer that practices forensics regularly. And what I mean by that is, well, sorry, that does not cut the mustard. It needs to be somebody who does, maybe, if not every day, close to every day. He's going to know that business. So that's like when you go to the doctor, you say, hey, I had this operation. What's the first question you ask? Doc, how many of these operations have you done? That's what you're going to ask. That's what you want to be doing with a forensic engineer. You don't want to get your cousin's best friend who designs commercial buildings, and he might even be a geotech, but guess what? How much forensic work has he done? Almost none. You're going to get obtuse, ridiculous, highly inflated price to do it that doesn't really tell you anything anyway. It's not going to be actionable, and he doesn't understand really what's going on. You don't want that. You want somebody who does foundation forensics on a regular basis. That's what you want.
Is this a problem in small towns?
Yeah, it is. So you might have to pay for somebody to drive to you. That's right.
Okay, yeah, because we've got a building in Idaho. It's a small town, but it's a small enough town that we're constantly having to pay people to drive out from Boise just to
Yeah.
help us. Or so towns can be a little bit of a maintenance
Tough.
nightmare.
Even in Arizona, it's tough. There's lots of small towns all around Arizona. A good 4 or 5 hour drive from Phoenix. You're going to have to pay for that. I don't have any other solution for that, other than the fact that if I can get enough home inspectors to do this work and become certified, maybe more engineers will accept their data and not
Yeah.
have to go to the site. But that's another one of my projects that I'm trying to change the world on.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. You have successfully exited your business, your forensic engineering and your foundation repair business, which I think it's fascinating that they have coexisting. You successfully exited, you're quote unquote retired, and you are finding yourself now being very mission driven. You still have your real estate passive income, and you're able to just sit back and think to yourself, like, what do I want to do with my knowledge and my ability to contribute? So tell us a little bit more about that. Who are you trying to reach? What would you like the listener to do to reach out to you after the show if they can help you in your mission?
When I sold my company, I took some time off and wanted to reflect and think a little bit. And so I thought, I came across this quote from, I believe it was Aristotle. It said, true happiness comes from accomplishing things and doing what's right. And I thought, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. And that vibes with me. So I just decided this is what I'm going to do with my life. Maybe the catalyst is that the company that bought my foundation repair company, the forensic foundation company, and they promised to keep it going for 3 years. And after 3 months, they basically canned everybody. And so that was, you know what? That really got my dander up. This industry is not going to change itself from the inside. It's going to have to be done from the outside. And guess what? I guess I'm going to be the guy to do it. And yeah, it's a big mission because I've got to basically create a new industry and change people's perception and convince people to offer these services and all at the same time. But ultimately, it's my goal to convince everybody to call a forensic geotechnical engineer that specializes in foundation forensics and help foundation engineers offer these services. Now, I've thought about it a lot. I developed some software to help with these investigations that streamlines it, that we're incorporating artificial intelligence into and making testing and certification and training for people, for technicians out in the field. And by doing these two things together, we can bring the costs down and we can improve the business so that it offers something of value to homeowners or commercial business owners, because I've done a lot of that as well. And what we want to do is create a new reality where people can find them and they can be truly advised in a way that they benefit from instead of basically being sold.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hope that one of the things that the listener has learned from this podcast is this issue touches every single one of our lives almost every single day because we are afraid of foundation problems and we want to avoid it and all that. And we don't, most typical homeowners who just own their home aren't going to really have to ever deal with this. But because we may own a few rental houses, if we invest in a REIT,
Right.
the person running this has to be on top of this kind of stuff. And so foundations, how many millions and millions and millions of these are across the United States where we're investing? And it impacts every single one of us every single day.
Yep.
We're all
I agree.
problem
Think-
one pretty much most of the time.
Yep.
So yeah, it is a big mission, like what you're talking about. And there are several industries that could use a hero to get inside there and clean them up, just say no to root canals type of thing. But just being able to have someone like you in my network, this is where it's so important for the listener on podcasts like this. Like the next time you have any kind of question about a foundation, oh, you'll be like, guy on the podcast, Bob Brown, let me call him. And basically get pointed at least in the right direction and putting together, like you said, the software that you need, maybe some sort of a directory so we can, it's small towns, we can find the help we need. These types of things, you're actually doing it.
I do have a directory. First of all, I have a book, Foundation Repair Secrets. You can find it on Amazon. It's a bestseller. And you can find the book also on my website, which is the same name, Foundation Repair Secrets. And on that website, I have one of the tabs as a directory where people can look by state. Now, they can find residential forensic engineers. Now, I haven't vetted these guys, and there's no skin in the game. They're not paying me anything. I don't even know for sure. I'm finding a lot of them don't really do what needs to be done, but it's better than nothing. A- at least I've vetted them enough to know that their website claims that they do residential forensics. Okay, great. So there you go. It's a good place to start. And what I'm hoping people do is, I had one guy, I think it was in North or South Carolina, had a hell of a time. Couldn't get anybody to come out. I finally hooked him up with a guy in Texas who came out and took care of him. If people stay in touch with me and say, hey, I found this small mom and pop dude that is really good at foundation forensics. Oh, I want to add him to the directory so people can find him. That's what I'm trying to do to help people with that.
Yeah. I wish that we should have you come back on in a couple of months, maybe next year, because I think that there's an entire section that we haven't even touched on this episode of just from the entrepreneurial standpoint, just running a good, clean business, understanding how to have that transparency, being mission driven as an entrepreneur, a successful exit behind you. I have a lot to teach us just even on the business side, even a non-correlated business,
Sure.
not even be in the construction industry. So I wish that we had some time to jump into that as well. But I look forward to talking about it again in the future.
Yeah,
Some
absolutely. I'd love to.
entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. You mentioned how people can get a hold of you. We talked about the kind of person who should reach out and get a hold of you. And I think the biggest thing you've helped to do today is dispel some of that mystery and that fear around this from more of a consumer, non expert standpoint. But if you are listening and any geotechnical engineers, structural engineers, home inspectors, and you can pass that along to them and say, hey, there's this guy you need to talk to, Bob Brown, and he can help you be better at your craft, which is really as professionals with integrity is what we're all looking for.
That's right. And the ones that know what they're doing, right?
Yeah. And word gets around. All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
If you are ever, like I said, jump on, touch base, and have you back and just talk about geeky entrepreneurial stuff. Would love to
Love
have.
to. I've been through all the ringers, let me tell you.
I can't believe it. There's like a brotherhood almost of business owners where we know it's hard. We know there's no guarantee of success, but we keep doing it. We feel really driven, and it's usually not by money.
Yeah, and it's tougher than it seems. People say to me all the time, oh, you're so lucky. You have all this money, and you don't land on the top of the mountain by accident. You have to go through all the pain and suffering and risk and the hard work. And your employees are heading off to the lake on Friday afternoon, and you're stuck in the office trying to make payroll. That's the way it is. You choose your poison in life.
Yeah, I love that analogy. Now that we've lived in Salt Lake, we've taken up hiking. We hiked to the top of a mountain the other day. And at one point, the air was getting thin. And I'm like, why are we doing this? We had hiked the Grand Canyon last year, but I was out of shape again. And there's everything like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. And I had actually down on the trail, like my knees started to buckle and I just lay down in the middle of the trail. People were literally going down the mountain and walking over me and I couldn't speak. And she's fine. We don't need a helicopter. They were giving me peanuts and light jellies and all this stuff. And finally I was able to get my feet off the trail. I actually fell asleep on the scree and I woke up. Was I sleeping? And just trying to recover and get up and just crawl up that mountain. And we got up to the top and I like got a little picture of me at the top. And I remember, was this even worse? Climbing up before? Then the whole way down, I was just reflecting on like, this feels like my entrepreneurial journey right now.
Yeah, a lot of similarities, I'll tell you.
You don't land on the top of a mountain is exactly right. These kinds of scars are the brotherhood that binds us. And so just being able to get up there and having value in that stupid photo.
You know, that's right.
So I appreciate you sharing your journey with us. If you'd like to get in touch with either Bob or me after the show. You can find me easily at investwithemma.com if you'd like to invest passively. We know about foundations, right? We do hard money loans to basically fix and flip or renovators. And one of the reasons that we got into this is because if we ever need to take over a property and finish the renovation ourselves, we stay local and we stay relevant so that we can have that network of people to come and help us if we need to take over.
Yep.
It's one more way that we try to protect our investors by
That's the key. Have a
having.
good network.
Yep, exactly. Perfect. Thank you so much, Bob.
You
I
bet.
will talk to everybody next week when we have our next guest on. And until then, please get in touch and tell me about your dreams for your next passive income adventure.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.